This is part two of the podcast Log Cabin Politics and Manifest Destiny. In our previous podcast, we began to take a look at the settlement of Texas and how the Mexican War will alter this settlement opportunity that was led by the Austin family. The Mexican Civil War will ultimately end in otherwise Mexican independence from Spain. And the reason this alters things for the Texans that live there, and the Texans ultimately were individuals who had pledged their allegiance to Spain. And once this happens, Santa Anna, seen here, the leader of the Mexican Revolution, and helps to win their independence for them. One of the first things they're going to do is they're going to outlaw slavery. And this is not going to settle well with the Texans because the Texans have brought with them tremendous numbers of slaves because they are plantation owners here in Texas. Well, they ultimately are going to ignore the Mexican law, anti-slavery law, and it's going to create, as it says here, tremendous turmoil. This turmoil is ultimately going to lead to a movement by the Texans towards independence, and the person leading that will be Sam Houston. The Texas independence movement will have a multitude of situations, but the most pressing to our story begin here at the Alamo. And the Alamo is located today where San Antonio, Texas is. And what happened here is there was a group of individuals led by Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, who were in a Catholic mission, the Alamo, and they were surrounded by Santa Anna's military, and ultimately everybody in the Alamo will be killed with the exception of a woman, a slave, and some children. Ultimately, this leads to anger by the Texans and will lead to the subsequent defeat of Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. It leads to Texas independence as a nation, and they become their own nation known as the Lone Star Republic. And this began in 1836, and they'll remain their own country until the year 1845 when they gain U.S. statehood. Now, the purpose of backtracking into the history of Texas here is because these are the events that Martin Van Buren is inheriting, as well as we'll see here, some economic issues. And he's going to take over in a country that is really moving towards its first ever depression. In order to understand sort of the plight here that Van Buren inherits, it all dates back into issues that we had with the banks. And Andrew Jackson was not in favor of the Second Bank of the United States. Because of his attacking this bank, it led to a lack of confidence in the U.S. dollar. And this is right around when Van Buren gets the presidency. It leads to then government spending and deficit. Ultimately, a huge portion of our woes in our country had to do with land speculation. We had inflated land prices coupled with bank loans for these inflated prices, and it led to people defaulting on their loans, much to similar to what's happened in the past few years in the United States. While none of this was Martin Van Buren's fault, Martin Van Buren will be blamed for this circumstance. The other issue Martin Van Buren finds himself in is the issue of slavery. It's still around, still a huge issue. And in the U.S. Congress, we actually have imposed what is known as the Gag Rule to prevent the discussion of slavery from being brought up. And it was really John Quincy Adams, an abolitionist of sort, who's really bringing up these issues. And everybody's trying to keep him from talking about slavery. Bottom line here, though, is there's a lot of issues. And Martin Van Buren, otherwise nicknamed Little Van, his problems are Texas wants to be a state. He's got an economic depression. The abolition movement is becoming more intense, and people are putting this all on him. He's got a lot to deal with, and an election year is coming up.